for that introduction, Leslie. I'm Steve Sharp. I am the operations manager here at VCGI, as well as wearing some other hats. And so as you'll see on this slide, I also act as the program manager for Vermont's Imagery Program. And I'm going to be touching on a few topics here today. First, I'm going to give you an overview of Vermont's Imagery Program, and then I'm going to get into how you go about finding the imagery that you're looking for. So I'll go down through various options for finding and downloading imagery, accessing web services that have imagery in it, as well as some offline options for getting the information offline. So Vermont's Orthophoto Program, at least the Orthophoto Program as we know it, began in the early 70s. There were previous efforts to that establishment of the program, which resulted in the collection of imagery, but the Orthophoto Program as we know it was established in the early 70s. It was a traditional program based on analog aerial photography, which resulted in both the production of film negatives as well as print maps that were available through the program. The program has really, from its inception, been based on acquisition of approximately 1/5 of the state each year. There's certain cycles where that has varied. Sometimes it has varied because of funding limitations. Sometimes it has varied because of limitations on any given year because of acquisition conditions. It could be weather conditions, it could be ground conditions. The imagery is a leaf-off imagery product. So Vermont's Ortho Imagery is since its inception been a leaf-off product. And it's collected during the springtime, which is the optimum time for both leaf-off as well as sun angle. So all of the imagery prior to 1994 was collected as analog and is only available in analog form, albeit I'll touch briefly later on efforts to make that information available digitally. Starting in 1994 is when the Ortho program moved to a digital product. Now, the imagery that was collected from 1994 until about 2000 was actually film negatives that were subsequently scanned and digitized and then made available in digital form. But from our image library, as you'll see from the data portal, you can get Vermont orthophotos starting from 1994 until the most recent being 2016. In 2011, we transitioned from a black and white panchromatic, which was everything prior to 2011. We transitioned to a true color as well as a color infrared, near infrared band, so a 4-band imagery product. The program in the past was a 50 centimeter resolution, and I'm referring to from 1994 to 2015. It was a 50 centimeter resolution. We have subsequently moved to a 30 centimeter base with our new Vintage 4 acquisition cycle, which began in 2016. The image you see on the right is an example of a 50 centimeter, and if I fast forward this, you'll see the difference. What you see here is actually a 15 centimeter. So as the slide suggests, this 30 centimeter plus resolution. So what that means is We are collecting 30 centimeter now as our base resolution, which is 30 centimeter ground sample distance. But we are also acquiring, within specific downtowns and villages, we're acquiring 15 centimeter resolution. So as you can see, there's a significant difference in the resolution of the imagery of the newer vintage. VCGI also maintains a library of other imagery other than what we collect and acquire through Vermont's Orthophoto Program, which we are responsible for managing. There are other sources of imagery that have been acquired by other entities. So those could be collected at the federal level. There are cases where there are special projects that may have occurred over the years where we've been able to bring other information, other imagery into our holdings. So for example, the NAPE imagery, which is, I believe, the National Agricultural Inventory Program. Hopefully I got that right. It's managed by the USDA. And they've been releasing, at least in the case of Vermont, since 2003, a 1 meter leaf-on 4-band imagery. It's been a 1 meter until last year of 2016, where they actually upgraded to a 60 centimeters. So the resolution has actually improved. What we do is we add that to our library and we project it into the Vermont State Plane Coordinate System and integrate that into the both downloads and services, web services that we offer. There's also a bit of a grab bag of miscellaneous other imagery. As I suggested, there have been special projects here and there where imagery has been acquired for different areas. It's really a bit of a hodgepodge. But in some cases, there's some pretty nice stuff to be found, so it's good just to be aware. There's also quite a treasure trove of historic old imagery that exists out there. And this is something that at this point is not yet available for download from the Vermont OpenGeo data portal. But it is something that VCGI is actively working on. We have some preliminary data that's been digitized that we've been able to acquire from a variety of different sources that have digitized old imagery, and we have begun to organize this so that it can be loaded into the Vermont geodata portal. So our hope is that probably within this calendar year we'll begin to roll out and provide access through the portal to some of this older aerial photography. Some of it will be georeferenced, others may not, and that's a bit of part of the challenge. So going forward, our hope is that we'll be able to put more and more of this out there. So let's get into actually finding what you need. So as probably many of you already know, VCGI, in collaboration with our state agency partners as well as others outside, such as regional planning commissions, maintain a federated OpenGeo data portal, essentially a data portal providing access to GIS geospatial data that is collected by state agencies and others. What I want to do is step through some workflows on how you can use this portal to access information for download, as well as some of the other access options that we have. So let's step through here finding imagery on the portal. So once you go to the portal, which is at geodata.vermont.gov, or you can just go to our website at vcgivermont.gov and you'll find it there. What you want to do is you want to select imagery in the options under data. There's a selection of different icons there with different themes. The imagery icon is the one you want to select. Now if you do that, you'll get a list of results. A tip that I'll give you is when searching for imagery, what you want to do is sort on the name field on the right side. That will sort it by year. That'll hopefully make it a little easier for you to find what you're looking for. Now, for those who've used the portal and maybe for those who haven't, there's really not any one perfect way to find what you need. You have to use a combination of searching and filtering and the highly technical term sleuthing to dig around and find what you need. I generally find that taking the approach of going from the main page, selecting on imagery, sorting on name, and then looking through to find the year and the area that you're looking for. And I'm going to step through in a bit sort of a live demonstration of that. But once you find what you need, you would select that item, and what will happen is it's going to open up a tool that will help you then select the individual images for you to download. So it's important to understand that the way the imagery is acquired, it's acquired and stored as tiles, so as individual files that encompass a particular footprint. And so when you select a particular image data set for download, you'll be presented with this tile data download tool. And it's a simple web-based tool that allows you to zoom in and zoom out and pan around and then identify the particular tile. You could call it a square within the area of interest, and often in many cases you're going to want to select more than one. And once you do, you'll get a pop-up that will allow you to then click and download the file. Now all of the tile downloads are in a JPEG 2000 file format. So that means you need to have software that can read a JPEG 2000 file. Now most GIS packages such as ArcGIS or QGIS or I believe MapInfo would have, as long as they are modern versions of those, would have the ability to read a JPEG 2000 file. There may be other software packages that may not, such as AutoCAD, and so you'll potentially have to find a way to convert that, or use the custom download tool option, which is on the right side of the screen. Here's a little red box that just got highlighted around this. Use the clip and zip tool. Sometimes we call it custom download, clip and zip tool, same thing. And that gives you more options. It allows you to select an area. So in this example here, I've gone in, and this is I'm working off the same one. So this is actually, I had selected the 1994 black and white aerial photography. And here you can see I've zoomed in so that I get to the point where I can see the imagery, and I've drawn a polygon, and now I can choose what format. So you can choose from JPEG 2000, TIFF, ERDAS, Imagine, and ESRI file geodatabase. Just be aware that it does have size limits, so you can't select a really large area. But this is a good tool for if you have a particular project within a certain area and you just want to go in and snag that piece of the imagery. This is a good tool for doing that. So let's jump to, actually before doing that, let me give you a quick demo of what I just did. So as I said, click on imagery here. I can sort on name. Now I've got everything sorted by year. I'm going to go and select this first option for demo purposes. Now I can zoom in on that map. I can select any of these tiles and I can click download, and that'll give me the option to download the file. Or I can go to this clip and zip tool here and go through a process of selection. I zoom in on the image. What's important to note is you can't clip and zip it if you don't see the image. So if you zoom out too far and you don't actually see the aerial photo, it means you're zoomed out too far and you can't actually clip it. In this case here, I'm going to make sure it goes quickly, I'm going to do a little small little box, and then I'm going to select format. Let's say, okay, I'm going to go with a file geodatabase and say I use ESRI software, so I want it in that format. And we just hope it works. Here we go. That's always good when the demo works. So that gives me a zipped package, which I can download into my downloads here. It already exists, so let's give it a new name. You can see I already did this earlier. I'll save that, and if I were to go in and open up that zip file, you'll see there's a data.gdb, and the GDB is a file geodatabase. So inside that file geodatabase, I got an extract of that imagery. So that's one example. Again, you can do other formats, as I mentioned earlier here. Just note that when you do formats such as TIFF, they can be quite large. So avoid selecting large areas because it could take quite a bit of time to do that. Let's now go back to the presentation and talk about other options for getting at the imagery. We just talked about how you can go to the portal and download files, image files, but you can also go to the portal, and if you go under the other search options, you'll see an offline link. Not very obvious. It's a bit buried down there, but it is listed there in the portal. If you select that, you'll get a listing of the offline options. At this point, we have essentially two main offline options for products. One is a LiDAR product. That's not the scope of our discussion today. The other is all imagery. So you can get all of the imagery that we have, which is, I think at this point, over 4 terabytes on a single drive. And for some, this is really the easiest way. Instead of having to each time go to the site and find what you need, some would rather have it all at once and be done with it. And so if you select that, it would be presented. Actually, in the case of these products, these are things that are packaged by VCGI and offered through us. So it actually takes you to a page on our website which provides you with more information. You can see in this case it costs $290. You probably wonder how we come up with that. That's essentially the cost of reproduction as stipulated under public record law. So we calculate the cost of the materials, meaning the drives, and the time to put all of the data onto the drives and then to ship it to you. We have an online payment option, and that allows you to go ahead and order online, and that sends us information, and we then process your request. So for some, that's a good option to know about. Let's talk about image services. So we've talked about downloading data. We've talked about ordering data on a brick, on essentially an external drive. And the third option I'd like to talk about today is accessing our image services. For many, this is a great option. It avoids the need to go and download individual files and organize and manage them on your end. And so therefore, in many cases, may give you what you need for what you need to do. So you can access through a couple different basic methods. the primary is going to the geodata portal and searching for image services there. The other is to use directly through ArcGIS Desktop, where you can create a connection to our image services server and access the services that way. And the other is through your web browser, just through going to the REST endpoint. And I'm going to touch on all of these as we proceed here. So Imagery Services, getting to them through the geodata portal. You'll notice at the top of the geodata portal website that there's a web services link. If you click on that, it's going to take you down to a section of the site. I've taken a screen snapshot here of it, and we'll actually do a live demo after this. This section includes all web services that are cataloged in the portal. The one specifically of interest in this case is going to be the Imagery Services. So if you were to click on that, it's going to give you a similar results list that you might get if you're searching for data. Again, I recommend that you use the name sorting to help sort things by name. It's worth noting on the left here, you'll notice we use tagging, and so we tag this as imagery and as a web service. It's a bit cryptic, but it's good to just be aware of how this sort of works under the hood. There's these tags that identify this as imagery and web services. It's also worth noting on the far right, you'll notice all the icons on the right at the top, they all have a name of service along the top. If this was data, it would say data along the top of that icon, but since it's not links to actual data download, since it's a link to a service, it says service. Not all that obvious, a little bit hidden. These are actually some things that we are working to refine in the portal, but that's beyond the scope of today. So if I were to follow through here and say, okay, well, hold on, before I do that, I'll step through this in a bit, but I wanted to highlight a couple things first before I go any further about things you should consider before using services. So that's what this next slide is about here. So use case, are you going to be using the services to create custom maps with ArcGIS Desktop and QGIS, or are you going to be using it to make web mapping applications? They're all potentially viable. Generally speaking, the web mapping, the image services are best and tend to perform best in the web world, in the web environment within a browser or a browser application. However, they do work and more or less work reasonably well in the desktop GIS packages as well. But there may be cases where you need maximum resolution and control, and in those cases you may want to actually download the data. Performance. So what kind of internet connection do you have? Are you on a fast internet connection, or are you out there that last house on the line like I am at my house where the internet connection is not that fast? And how's the performance of the service itself? So VCGI, we do our best to try to have well-tuned services, but we recognize at the same time we're not Google, so not everything is up to necessarily Google fast performance. So that's another consideration as to, is it going to meet your need or not? The other is life cycle. Is it guaranteed to be available all the time when you need it? No. VCGI has a life cycle policy. It basically says we attempt to guarantee support basically between 8 and 5 Monday through Friday. And generally speaking, the services are going to be up and running during other times as well, but there's no guarantee. So again, depending on your use case, does that matter or not? For many, it probably does not need to have a guarantee, but in some cases you may need that. And so therefore you may want to download the data, or you may want to turn to something else that has a higher level of service. So things to think about. Sometimes we don't stop to think before we we proceed, and then sometimes it's good to do that. So let's talk about, let me run through a little demo here online, and then we're going to get into some desktop use. So before I get buried in the desktop, let's go over that scenario searching on the portal. So if I go back to the portal homepage here, and I click on Web Services, you'll see I have Web Services. Here's my Image Services. I can click on that. Again, as I suggested before, I'm going to sort on name. So I have things in some order. What you'll notice is that things tend to be ordered, in the case of services, not by year, but by type. So in this case, it's black and white, and then you see color imagery, and then you see color infrared, and the like. And so if I were to actually select one of these, let's pick, let's go with color infrared, because I always think that is fun. So if I were to select that, you get to a page that, well, actually isn't that fun, is it? And so I want to point this out because many get confused by this. What is this? Well, you're looking at the REST endpoint of the service. So for your average Joe, it's not that obvious what to do next, but what I would just point you to are the links under View In. And under View In, you basically, it gives you options to where you can view it. So if you were to click to view in ArcMap, for example, what would happen is it would actually download a layer file. Again, this assumes you have ArcGIS. If I download that layer file, it's going to have a pointer to the service. So now if I click on that, and assuming all goes well, let's see, and so now it has gone ahead and opened it up in my ArcMap session. So that gives you one sort of example of how you would go about sort of finding stuff in the portal and opening up, in this case, in your desktop GIS. I'm going to get in a little more on some of the other options that are available to you, but I wanted to point that out. So I'm going to jump back into my presentation, and let's get a little bit deeper now into the ArcGIS, using these services in ArcGIS. So as I mentioned in what I just showed you, you can go directly from the portal. I'll show you again just to make sure we got it. We can go right from, linking from the portal. We can add it, click on ArcMap, and have it add right in to our ArcMap session, just like that. That's simple. That's all you need to do. Now, what you can also do is add a connection to our server. So let me show you how to do that. If I go back to my ArcMap session, I'm going to remove these just to clean things up. I can go to Add Data, and under Add Data, one of the things you'll see listed is GIS servers. If I select there, what I would want to do is add an ArcGIS server. And I want to use the GIS services. You're not going to have an ability to publish or administer VCGI services, so that's not an option. You would use the services that we have. And you don't need to remember this because it's in the slide deck that will be shared. You would put in the URL to our server, so maps.vcgi.vermont.gov/ArcGIS. And if I go ahead and do that, you'll see I've already got some other connections in there that created this second connection. Now I can go in there, and one thing that's not obvious is, well, where do you go to connect to it? So all of the image services are maintained under this EGC services folder, and you'll see that in this example here where it has EGC services. So that's an important thing to remember. That's where everything is. Those are the enterprise GIS services that we help to host. So once you've done that, you have a connection, and then really at any time, you can add imagery in. So in this case, I put the black and white in there. If I want to go back, I've now under my GIS servers, I have the connection to VCGI. It's always going to be there if I need it. I can go there. I can go under EGC services. There is some logic to the naming here. BW is black and white, CIR is color infrared, and CLR is for color. You'll see SP, that means state plane, WM means Web Mercator. Generally speaking, it's best to use whichever projection matches your data frame. Many are probably working in Vermont state plane, so you would want to select that. So in this case, I'm going to add the color imagery, and yes, here's this is why we do demos, so that things don't work and I can show you how to fix it. So you'll in some cases, we've noticed a problem with these services turning on. You can see I'm trying to turn it on and it's not turning on. If you encounter that, what you need to do, and I'll be sure to make an adjustment to the slide deck for the record, is you want to disable the cache view. And if you do that, it'll work. It's a bit of a quirk that we have yet to figure out how to resolve. Once you know how to work around it, it's a pretty easy workaround. So that's something to be aware of. So in this case, I've been able to add the color imagery, and you can work with it as if it were effectively on your desktop, but in this case, the imagery is streaming over the internet to your machine. So that's ArcGIS. Let's talk about some open source. In this case, QGIS, which is quite a popular product. Some of you may use it. How QGIS accesses our image services is through the Open Geospatial Consortium Web Map Service Specification. And so I'm going to step through some of the steps on how to do that. As this slide suggests, you would be adding a new connection to your QGIS, and then you would be adding that to your map in QGIS. And let's go ahead and actually do that. To do that, what we need to do is find that REST endpoint for the data that we want, and we want to select Web Map Service from the links. So here we go. Here is let's go back to start to ground zero. We've gone in and we've searched for imagery. We have our list of imagery potentially available to us, and now we want to go ahead and add it. So let's try, how about this 1994 to 2000? I know I keep getting stuck on that, but sometimes it's kind of interesting to look at some of this older stuff. So again, it's going to take us to that REST endpoint, and instead of focusing on this view in links, what we're actually in this case looking for are the links up here. And specifically what we want is WMS, which is Web Map Service, which is the OGC Web Map Service. Not obvious kind of stuff, but if you're using QGIS and open source software, you've probably run into this already. So if I click on that, what I'm trying to get is this URL. And once I have that, I can go to my QGIS session and I can select Add WMS. It says WMS/WMTS. You can just ignore the WMTS, but what that means is web map. It's a tiled web map service. In this case, we don't offer tiled OGC services, so you're just going to use the regular WMS. And I'm going to create a new connection, and I'm going to put in the name. In this case, we'll say Vermont black and white, 1994 to 2000, and I'm going to put state plane in there because I know it's state plane, so I'm going to identify it as such in the name. I'm going to hit OK, and then I'm going to connect to that new WMS profile that I've added. And the important thing is the important thing to remember is you got to hit this PNG thing, and I again don't need to remember this. I've made note in the PowerPoint. Yes, sorry about the jumping around. I just want to confirm. I made note in the PowerPoint. You got to select PNG. It'll more or less work in the other formats, but it's not going to give you the results you want. So let's jump back to QGIS here. I've selected PNG. I'm going to hit Add, and then I'm going to hope it works. And maybe it will. Maybe it will. There we go. It worked. Yes. Not the prettiest thing in the world, but if we were to zoom in, we can take a look at what we got going on. There we go. So you can see we're able to access that right in QGIS, open source. While I'm in here, let's take a look at task corners here. Task corners, the way it looked, let's see, between 1994 and 2000. This image right in here is probably around 96, I believe. And actually, just for to keep this somewhat interesting, let's go and see how it looks like on a more recent date. So let's go down through here. We have, let's see, let's select the best of, so black and white. This is Vermont best of black and white. So this best of stuff, what is all this stuff? You'll see Vermont best of black and white and Vermont best of color and Vermont best of color infrared. What this is we've taken the latest imagery and what we consider the highest resolution available and combine that into a service that we call the best of. So you could think of it as sort of the latest temporally in terms of the latest year, as well as the best resolution that we have. So if I were to open this, in this case, the latest best of black and white imagery, I can again go get that WMS URL. I can go back into my QGIS. I'm going to add it. I'm going to say new, and let's call it Vermont best of black and white state plane, because I'm working in state plane. That's the way I've set the coordinate system in my QGIS project. And there we go. I'm going to paste that URL in there. I'm going to let's see here. Make sure. Yes, just making sure I got that right. And now I'm going to connect to it. There it is. I'm going to select PNG so I don't forget to do that. I'm going to hit add, and then let's see if that works. Here we go. Close that, and voila. Now we see, if I were to toggle this on and off, excuse that pan. Here we go. You can kind of see it there. You see a field there that has nothing in it, and now you see a bunch of buildings. So there you go. You can already see some degree of change, land use, land cover change through some of the imagery that we have. Let me jump right back and keep moving along here so we have some time for questions at the end. So the other option is using the web, bringing these services into a web app. So I'm going to show you one example, which is using ArcGIS Online, and again, you don't have to use ArcGIS Online. These services are available both through the ArcGIS JavaScript API, those REST endpoints. And for developers, you'll know what I mean, or they are also available through those OGC WMS services. And again, a developer, you can look into that. Or if you're not, you can look into it as well. It's all very interesting stuff. But let me show you one example here that's quite straightforward. If I go back to that service, I'm going back to that 1994. Excuse the jumping around. So let's go back here to the portal. Here I am. Now let's not do black and white again. I'm going to change my mind. Let's do the color infrared since I like that. Now, because I'm going to want to use this in the web, I'm going to use Web Mercator, because in web world everything is Web Mercator. That's the de facto standard. So it's good to pair what you're doing, the service, with what you're doing. So that's why we've tried to make it fairly clear in the naming what's Web Mercator and what's State Plane. So I'm going to use it for the web. So I'm going to click on here, and I'm going to say, hey, let's open this up in ArcGIS Online. So if I follow that link, now I've got the color infrared imagery open in ArcGIS Online. If I happen to be logged in, so if I wanted, I could then, let's say, okay, I'm going to zoom in to a particular area. I want to make a map for somebody. This looks like the area that I'm interested in. To make the map, you can see in this case color infrared. You show the which highlights areas of vegetation and non-vegetation. In this case, this is spring, so you can see fields that are essentially bare earth. The stuff in red is fields that are beginning to turn green, grass is turning green, not really spring, and you see conifers that are evergreen. I could take this, I can save as, I can call it my webinar map, and we'll give it a sample, and we'll save that. And then if I wanted, I could share that information. So I could share it as a link with someone. I could potentially create a web app and then share that web app. So all kinds of options. Again, in this particular workflow, it assumes you have access to ArcGIS Online. Now there are free accounts in ArcGIS Online, and you can do quite a bit with those, but they also have certain limitations. So this just gives you one example of how you can fairly easily integrate the Vermont orthophotos into web projects that you might be doing. All right, I think I'm getting near the end here, so I think we may have time for questions if there are any. Yes, there I am, Leslie.
Hi, Steve. Yes, we do have a question. Just open it up so I can see it. Okay, Pam asks, how can you tell what year the image is when you're looking at the best of Imagery Services?
Ah, yes.
I didn't.
Yeah, that's a good one, and one that doesn't really necessarily have a great answer. But let me see. It depends on context to a great degree. Let's go over to my desktop app and see if we can explore that question a little bit here. Let's see, if I do an identify operation on the image, let's see what I get. So I just use my identify tool in ArcGIS, and what you'll see is I didn't get much of value out of that, because it's a mosaic of mosaics, and it's just listing everything. So it's not going to give me the exact date, okay? But you can, what you can identify is the year. So if you notice in this case, I'm using the best of color. I did the identify tool, and if I select, it has to be not the individual cell itself, but this other record that identifies which mosaic data set, which data set it is. What you want to look for, and this is maybe a little hard to see here, is the year. So this is telling me, in this case, this is 2013. If I were to go, let's see, somewhere else on the map, it doesn't give me the exact date though. If I were to go somewhere else, let's go down to Brattleboro here and see what that tells us down there. So here's Brattleboro. Let's do an identify here. I do an identify here, and again, go to the data set, 2015. So in the case of the best of services, the best you can do is get the year, not the individual day. To get the individual day, you would have to load the specific service that's for that year. So I mean, I can demonstrate that, but I don't know if we have time for that. Do we have time for that, Leslie?
Sorry, I was muted.
Okay.
Well, we do have time for that if you want. I don't. Hopefully people are thinking of their questions. I don't see any more questions right now. I was just going to ask you to do that same operation on the older black and white imagery.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So if I turn this off and we're to select this older black and white.
That does the same.
In this case, well, in this case, this is best of. So you mean older, meaning they're really old. So hold on. Let me just go back to my browser here and go to 1994 state plane. Let's add that into ArcMap. So again, click on ArcMap, download the layer file, click on here. That should now add, so you can see that's quite different, fairly grainy. I don't know how much that comes through. But this is, let's find out which year. I don't know which year. So if I do an identify, and again, go in the data set, and I scroll down, it says 2000, right? So this black and white image was collected in 2000 versus when I had looked at, if we look at this color image here, and I do an identify on that, the year is 2015. So obviously completely different too. One is a panchromatic black and white. In the case of the 2000 data, it was actually an analog photo that was scanned, and that's why you notice quite a difference in terms of the image quality. Not only because it's black and white, but because it's also a scan of an analog photo. And especially at this scale, which is really not the design scale for this imagery. Yeah, so that's how you get to the year. If I were to get to the individual, excuse me, one thing that's worth noting is that we also have, that's something that I generally try to advertise, but it should be something you're aware of, because a lot of folks find it useful. We do have something called the Vermont All Imagery and Indexes. You see it's the first one because we've listed alphabetically. If I were to add this is slightly different in the sense that it's a map service as opposed to an image service, and some of that gets into technical terminology. But basically it contains the kitchen sink, as you can see, of all imagery that we have, all indexes of all the imagery and everything else. So it's a fairly large service that can be useful at times, and so let's see if it is. So if we go ahead and save that and add that in here. All right, so in this case, you'll notice in my table of contents, I've got the list of everything. So I can actually play around with different ones. It defaults to best of color. I can actually turn that off, and I could say, well, let's go with something earlier, which is Bennington Wyndham. That's the same one. Oh, I'm actually noticing a problem. I don't see the 2000 in there. So this set of imagery includes indexes. So for example, I'm looking at the index set here. I can turn the indexes on, and if I did an identify on that, let's see what we get. In this case, we get, what do we get? Yeah, that's what we get. So what we get in this case, actually, when we do an identify on the index layers, it's going to show us, based on whichever indexes we have turned on, which imagery falls in that area. And in this case, it turns out to be the 2015 imagery. And actually from here, if you wanted, you could actually select this. Oh, that's not, oh, I see what's going on. Bad example. If this was actually the correct URL, it would actually allow you to download the file, but there's actually an error in there. So
can I
yeah.
throw another question at you? I'm a little bit unclear on what exactly she means, but Caroline is asking saying that when she uses the ArcGIS server connection, when she tries to print a map that has the imagery in there as a service, the image will not fully print. Any thoughts on how to fix this problem? And I asked her, I'm not sure if she saw my response to that, I asked her to clarify what she means by not fully print. I don't know if she means, I assume she means the whole image is not showing when she prints it out. I don't know if you've come across that before. I haven't had that happen, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, you know, I haven't, but I've heard some people mention that before.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, Caroline says the whole image won't print. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, why don't we try it? Let's go to layout view. See what happens, right? So I don't know by print if she means like it doesn't come out on her plotter,
yeah,
or if she means, you know. So, but I'm not gonna. Obviously, I can't demo the plotter. But if I were to let's see here, export the map to a PDF. So let's see, make a PDF out of it, and let's stick it in our downloads folder here, and then hit save. See what happens. Looks like it's saving it.
And she did clarify that she does mean it doesn't come out on the printer correctly. It always looks fine on the screen. It's just when she goes to actually print.
I see. I see. Well, I guess all I could suggest is that can she successfully export to PDF, and if so, then try printing from there and see if that works.
Right.
Sounds like a technical snafu within her environment.
Right.
If it doesn't show up in the PDF, then I would suspect there's something else. Maybe it's related to the service itself, and certainly she can reach out to me and I can try to help her with that. But I would suggest try this PDF option and then try printing from PDF. It may not be the best long-term solution, but it's if nothing else, a good test.
Yep. And although it's possible other people are experiencing this, and I encourage anybody who's on the webinar to, and Joanna points out that it doesn't happen with the ESRI. Oh, maybe that's right. So Joanna commented on this, and I think I remember her mentioning this before, that it doesn't happen when she's connected to the ESRI Imagery Services.
Right. Well, yeah, I wouldn't be able to know offhand exactly why there would be a difference. It is worth noting, though, that ESRI and that gives me a quick segue as we approach the end here. If you, I'm going to go to my ArcGIS home here. I'm just going to actually sign out just so that it's generic. If you go to the ESRI site, one thing you'll find is their World Imagery Service, which is quite handy. So I'm going to go in and switch actually over here to Imagery. And if I switch to ESRI's Imagery Service, which is a nice service, it's free, it's got some good stuff in it. And in the case of Vermont, what VCGI does is we actually submit our orthophotos to ESRI through their community mapping program, and they then take that information and they add it to their World Imagery Service. So, for example, if I zoom in here, in this case, what I'm looking at is the 2016 orthophotos covering, in this case, Rutland area, and this has been integrated into the World Imagery Service. So this is true for all of Vermont. The only caveat I will add to that is, as the information gets older over time, ESRI begins to replace it with what they feel is newer. So for example, as I'm panning here, you'll see you're going from, oh, there's this leaf off, Vermont orthophoto, and then all of a sudden you're in green territory. And the reason for that is this green stuff is the 60 centimeter NAPE 2016. Well, obviously, it's much newer than for this area. The orthophotos for this particular area, geographic area right here, is probably something like 2013. I'm taking a bit of a guess. So from ESRI's workflow, they say, oh, the 2016 NAPE is newer than the 2013 Vermont orthophoto. The 2013 Vermont orthophoto was a 50 centimeter, pretty close to 60 centimeters. So they basically replaced it, which for a lot of folks is fine, but for those who want to get access to the leaf off, the World Imagery Service won't always be a reliable way to get to VCGI service, the Vermont orthophotos that way. And so it's just good to be aware of that factor, and that Vermont, the VCGI Ortho Imagery Services, in some cases are services that you'll still need to go to if you need leaf off. And having said that, I think I'm over by 2 minutes. Always happy to hang out. You know where to reach me. I'm here at VCGI. Send me an email, give me a call. We are always working to try to improve what we have to offer, and we understand at times that things may not be quite as the way you might like, but we're always open to hearing what you have to say, and to try to see how we can improve our service and or how we can work with you to resolve any problems you might be having.
Thank you, Steve. And just a reminder to everyone that this webinar was recorded, and it will get posted on our YouTube channel, and you'll be able to access that also from our website in the event archive in the next day or two. So feel free to go back and check the webinar out again, or share it with someone else if you'd like to. So thank you very much, Steve, for going through all this. And if anybody does have ongoing questions, like Steve said, just get in touch with us and we'll do our best to answer them. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.